Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, you can be among the first every morning to find out what today's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Welcome back to Focal Point, AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Energetic conversation with the last caller. Looking at a story here from Newsvine. And according to Rachel Jantel, she heard Trayvon Martin saying, "Get off, get off." Now, remember, she thought on the 911 call that was Trayvon Martin. And it seems pretty clearly based on the evidence that was George Zimmerman. So it's possible that what she was hearing was George Zimmerman saying, "Get off, get off." What she says she heard, and again, we don't have a recording of this, but what she heard is Trayvon asking Mr. Zimmerman, "What are you following me for?" Then I heard a hard-breed man come and say, "What are you doing around here?" Now, my understanding of the sequence here is that Zimmerman's going back to his truck. Trayvon Martin is the one that accosts him and accuses him of following him because he'd seen that George Zimmerman had followed him for a time and then lost track of him, called 911. "I got a suspicious guy. Where do we go?" And he's looking for an address. And then Trayvon Martin is the one that confronts George Zimmerman. "What are you following me for?" So the verbal altercation begins with Trayvon Martin coming out of the shadows, coming out of the dark, confronting George Zimmerman, who's on his way back to his truck. And then apparently some sort of scuffle ensues and somebody shouting, "Get off, get off." Now, Rachel Jantel says she thinks it's Trayvon Martin, but she was also mistaken about whose voice was on the 911 call. Anyway, let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Dwayne, Jackson, Tennessee. Dwayne, welcome. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call, Brian.
Yes, sir.
Let me start off by saying, I think the jury reached the accurate decision in that. I kind of base that on, a lot of people, I think they should remember what Jesus told them, that they're wanting to be hard on Zimmerman. "Ye without sin cast the first stone." But what I would like to know is, during the course of the investigations, was there anything that anybody's aware of that would point toward possibly Trayvon's activity in these burglaries and stuff? Have they stopped? And, their family has been interviewed. They seem like a very nice family. The Trayvon's supposed to be a good kid, not involved in anything. But, they wouldn't be the first kid, unfortunately, I have to say, that, they were sneaking around behind their parents' back, going on with drug activity or doing things that the parents or anybody else was not involved with. Is there anything to indicate that he might have been involved in something? Have the burglary stopped?
Well, I don't know. I don't think there's any reason to think that Trayvon Martin was involved in any of the 8 or 9 burglaries that had preceded this event. And now we do know that he was apparently involved in a jewelry theft. He was found with burglary tools and jewels. And remember, the police chief at the school district tried to turn that into sort of school hijinks so it wouldn't go on the crime record because he wanted to try to make the crime statistics for his school district look better. So he's reclassifying some of these crimes as something else, as school pranks or whatever, because he had, I think, 13 pieces of jewelry or something like that, but it was a significant haul and really should have been tried for that and should have been behind bars, but it was just classified as something else, and so he was simply suspended from school. So we know that he apparently had committed burglary before, but no reason to think that any of the burglaries had been in this particular community. He'd just gotten there, and he was there because he'd been suspended from school, and so he had come. He'd just shown up and been in that community just for a short time, which is one of the reasons why Zimmerman was curious about him, because I had not seen him around. So,
and he may very well be an innocent kid just going to the store, coming home. It's unfortunate the family lost their child like that. Maybe Zimmerman made a bad decision, but I just hadn't heard anybody ask that question. And, I know where Elizabeth was going with that. Maybe the suspicion was mistaken for fear that somebody was following him. And I follow that. I understand that. But, a lot of people need to just kind of cool off, calm down, and just, sometimes you just can't always hold somebody responsible for something. We all make mistakes.
And Geraldo Rivera, I don't often agree with Geraldo Rivera, but he said, not every tragedy is a crime. I mean, and I agree with what you're saying here. I think justice was done. I think a just verdict was reached. That does not mean that we don't look at this as a tragedy. Doesn't mean that we don't feel grief with and for the parents. Doesn't mean we don't pray for them. I prayed for comfort for them and for their family yesterday, as well as protection for the Zimmerman family. But as Geraldo said, look, it's a tragedy, but not every tragedy is a crime. All right, well, listen, I appreciate the call, Dwayne. Thank you for that. Let's go to Brent in Houston, Texas. Brent, welcome to Focal Point. What's on your mind?
Hi, Brian. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, you bet.
I actually have 2 points that I'd like to share. First off, I've been in law enforcement for going on 18 years, and the number one thing, going to the lady that had called in just a little while ago, we explain to anyone who is in neighborhood watch and or security, we explain to them that their only job is to watch and observe and report, and that's it. So when she got all upset that supposedly Mr. Zimmerman was following Trayvon, well, that is indeed security or neighborhood watch's job. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to observe and report.
So in other words, to follow at some distance where you don't initiate a confrontation, but you follow at some distance, that would be a permissible thing for somebody in a neighborhood watch role to do.
Not only is it permissible, that's exactly what we in law enforcement teach. So for her to get upset and offended by the fact that Mr. Zimmerman was or was not following Trayvon is absolutely ludicrous. Whether or not Trayvon was black, orange, yellow, red, whatever his color, has nothing to do with George Zimmerman's job. Trayvon was a suspect for whatever reason, and he was being followed and observed, and that's all. When the confrontation happened, who threw the first punch? Personally, I believe it was Trayvon, but that's neither here nor there. The public needs to understand that that was their job. That is neighborhood watch's job. That is security's job. That is what they're supposed to do, and I hope and pray that they continue to do exactly that.
Now, one last question, Brent. The George Zimmerman's story, which is the story that I happen to believe, is that when he was told by 9/11, we don't need you following him, that he did stop following him and just looked for an address so he could tell the police if they were going to respond, where to come, because they got to know they can't drive around the entire subdivision, but they need to know where the incident is being observed. So that would also be appropriate behavior to get an address so police would have some idea where to come.
Absolutely correct. That is absolutely correct. My second point is the fact that everyone is up in arms saying that there was no justice. I want people to understand that both the defense and the prosecution chose those jurors. So they both had the opportunity to argue. They both had the opportunity to cross. The jury made their decision according to what they saw and heard, and that is justice. That is it. There's no two ways about it. So for everyone to get up in arms saying that there was no justice, we'll blame it on prosecution just as much.
Yeah, because this jury, what you're saying is this jury was acceptable to the prosecution. I mean, this jury was not forced on the prosecution against their will. They had the same opportunity the defense did to be a part of selecting the juror. They had a certain amount of preemptions. They could dismiss jurors without even having to explain why they were doing it. So this was a jury of the peers, and the prosecution agreed that this was a fit jury.
That is absolutely correct.
All right, Brent, listen, I appreciate that very, very much. Thank you. Thank you for that. And there was some complaint about the racial makeup of the jury, that it was all white, or maybe five white and one Hispanic, and there was at least one black juror, maybe more. But the prosecution dismissed that potential black juror because he watched Fox News. So part of the racial composition of the jury was due to actions that the prosecution took. Let's go to Arthur in Louisiana. Arthur, welcome to Focal Point. What's on your mind?
I wanted to say that I see that both sides have a point, and